And joining us with more on the legal reform is Alex Traiman, Jerusalem Bureau Chief for JNS. Alex, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Lidar.
So, Alex, you're in Jerusalem. We've seen very difficult scenes from today. I mean, what is your take on everything that's unfolded here?
Well, that's a very loose question. Last night we saw hundreds of thousands of activists um, demonstrating in favor of judicial reforms on the same week when you had thousands of protesters. Um, in protests against the judicial reform. So it's been an issue that has now lasted for months and has really gripped the heart of the nation, so much so that the Prime Minister of Israel was now in the hospital for a sore heart.
I can't remember scenes unfolding and such a division in the country. As you mentioned, the two protests for and against last night. I mean, maybe the last time we saw this was with the Gaza disengagement. You know, will Israel be able to recover, to heal, to unify after this?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the Gaza disengagement because this was an issue in which you had 8,500 residents and 21 thriving Jewish communities in the Gaza Strip and Gush Katif block. And the government basically unilaterally decided to remove them from their homes. These were tax-paying citizens that had been there for years. And it was a tremendously divisive policy that the government took against the um, promises of the Ariel Sharon government that he wouldn't do anything like that. And it really did tear at the fabric of the state of Israel. Here, you have just the canceling of the reasonableness standard, which seems to be a very basic and minor one of the judicial reforms that the government wished to pass. It doesn't really affect not even one Israeli citizen tomorrow. And yet there's been literally hundreds of millions of shekels invested into a campaign, the most expensive campaign in Israeli history, to try to encourage these protests against judicial reform. So I do think that there's something else going on over here. I mean, we saw that Ehud Barak for years has been talking about bringing down the government using protests, and we're seeing it play out now over the issue of judicial reforms.
But you know, Alex, I have to ask: is it worth it? Is this reform, this legal reform, as you said, it's a minor part of the legal reform. Is it worth all the division that it's causing today?
Right. I mean, that's a great question. On the one hand, there's definitely need for judicial reform, particularly in the eyes of a right-wing government that sees this Supreme Court as the last block on right-wing policies. And it is a left-wing, self-selecting, homogeneous court that does block right-wing policies. So this really has much more to do with just the question of reasonableness. The left wing accuses Netanyahu of being King Bibi, and the right wing believes that the king in Israel is the court, and so this is really a question over power. I don't know that this was the right move for the government to have taken from the beginning, from the outset, especially the way they rolled out the judicial reforms, coming with an all or nothing package in the beginning, which really did rile up the entire nation. If they had started maybe from the outset only with the reasonableness standard clause, perhaps we wouldn't see these types of demonstrations in the street. But at this point, hindsight is 2020, and we're at the situation in which we're at.
All very valid and very important questions. I mean, if you now sitting in Jerusalem with the scenes unfolding today, if you had a message that you would send to the people of Israel, whether right or left, what would that message be?
I think the message would be to take down the heat. I don't think that this is the most serious issue in the world. Certainly, when you look at, like you mentioned, the Gaza disengagement or the Oslo Accords, this is not as deeply divisive as everybody makes it out to be right now. And it's a question of who won the elections. The right wing government, after 4 consecutive elections, managed to form a government. They want to have the policies that they want to pass. They have a mandate from the people to do that. And, if the pendulum will swing and the left wing will come into power, as Benny Gantz has said, they will overturn it. So, there's a democratic check on this government. It's called the electorate, and, elections have consequences. So I think it's important for everybody to just take the temperature down a bit. This isn't an existential threat the way some of the organizers of this protest movement are making it out to be.
All right, well, let's hope indeed that we'll see less division and more unity here in Israel. Alex Traiman, thank you so much for your analysis today.
Thanks for having me.